For most of his adult life, Ryan Hale believed he had no choice but to keep moving forward in whatever direction life pushed him. He wasn't raised to imagine options or possibilities. He was raised to survive. Growing up in a chaotic household where bills went unpaid and affection was rare, Ryan learned early that if he wanted stability, he would have to build it himself. That sense of self-reliance carried him into adulthood, but it also made him vulnerable. Vulnerable to manipulation, vulnerable to promises that seemed too good to question, and vulnerable to an industry that offered financial freedom, at a cost he never fully understood until much later. When he entered the adult entertainment world, it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like a lifeline. But the real turning point in Ryan's story would come years later, after he walked away from the set for the last time and realized that rebuilding a life was far more difficult than stepping into the spotlight. Ryan had always been quiet and introspective, someone who observed more than he spoke. In his early 20s, he was working 3 jobs just to pay rent, bartending at night, loading delivery trucks at dawn, and doing freelance modeling whenever opportunities appeared. It wasn't sustainable. His bank account was always low, his energy even lower, and the dream of a stable life felt distant. So when a photographer he trusted connected him with someone in the adult industry, saying the pay was excellent and the environment professional, Ryan allowed himself to consider it. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he could handle it. He told himself a dozen things that made the decision feel less overwhelming. His first shoot wasn't glamorous, but it wasn't frightening either. The crew was polite, the shoot was over quickly, and he walked out with more money in a single envelope than he typically earned in a week. That night, as he held the cash in his hands, he convinced himself this was the smartest decision he had ever made. What he didn't see at the time was that the envelope also contained a silent truth. Once you begin building a life from this kind of money, it becomes dangerously hard to walk away from it. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. Ryan became a familiar face in the industry. Directors praised his professionalism, agencies fought to book him, and fans recognized him online. With each new scene, the persona he crafted, confident, carefree, invulnerable, grew stronger. And the stronger that persona grew, the smaller the real Ryan felt. But he pushed those feelings aside because life was finally stable. He paid his bills on time, he had savings, and for the first time, he didn't fear unexpected expenses. He told himself that as long as he kept the work separate from his real identity, everything would be fine. But identities have a way of bleeding into each other. The first cracks appeared when Ryan tried to date seriously. At first, he avoided telling people what he did for work. Eventually, he learned that avoidance only delayed the inevitable. Some potential partners reacted with harsh judgment. Others pretended to be accepting before jealousy took over. A few tried to convince him to quit immediately, not because they understood the emotional toll it took on him, but because they didn't want to be associated with his career. Over time, Ryan stopped trying to form romantic connections altogether. It felt easier, safer, to keep relationships brief and distant. He told himself he was protecting others, but deep down, he was protecting himself from rejection, from shame, from the fear that nobody would ever truly see him beyond his screen persona. The industry was not all darkness. There were friendships, genuine ones, built on shared experiences and mutual support. There were performers who became like family, but even within that circle, everyone carried their own burdens and nobody wanted to appear weak. Conversations about mental health were rare, conversations about boundaries even rarer. Everyone was constantly hustling, constantly adapting, constantly performing, even when no cameras were rolling. Ryan learned to smile through stress, laugh through exhaustion, and carry on even when his body was pleading for rest. The physical demands were more intense than most outsiders could imagine. Long shooting days, strict fitness routines, and constant travel eroded his sense of normalcy. There were times when he felt disconnected from his own body, as if it were simply a tool he maintained rather than a part of himself. But he ignored the warning signs he always had, until the day he couldn't anymore. It happened in the middle of a routine shoot. Everything was ordinary. Same crew, same lighting, same routine. But as the cameras started rolling, Ryan felt something shift. A wave of anxiety surged through him so suddenly that he froze. His chest tightened, his vision blurred, and he felt like he couldn't breathe. The director called for a break, assuming he was just tired, but Ryan knew something inside him had snapped. He had reached a limit he didn't know existed. He finished the shoot that day, but something had changed. The persona he had relied on for so long no longer protected him. The mask had cracks, and through those cracks, all the feelings he had suppressed for years seeped out: fear, exhaustion, loneliness. That night, sitting alone in his apartment, he finally admitted to himself something he had never dared to voice. He didn't want to do this anymore, and not just that. He didn't even know who he was outside of the industry. Leaving wasn't simple. The industry had become his financial foundation, his social circle, his identity. Walking away meant stepping into uncertainty, but the breakdown on set made one thing clear: staying would destroy him. So he made the decision quietly, without fanfare. He didn't announce it publicly. He simply stopped accepting new projects. He told a few close friends who were supportive but skeptical. Most people who left eventually came back. The money was too good, the outside world was too unforgiving, but Ryan was determined, even if he didn't know what the next chapter would look like. The first few weeks felt liberating. He slept more than he had in years. He took long walks, cooked meals, listened to music without thinking about schedules or performance requirements. But as the weeks turned into months, the reality of his situation settled in. Savings dwindled. Job applications went unanswered. Employers were hesitant when they recognized his name. Some pretended they didn't know. Others made it painfully clear that they did. It became evident that rebuilding his life would not be as simple as walking away. The biggest challenge wasn't finding a job. It was rebuilding his identity. Without the industry, Ryan felt unanchored, like a character without a script. He struggled with confidence, with purpose, with the fear that he had wasted years of his life in a career that left him with little he could put on or resume. Nights became difficult again. Old anxieties resurfaced. Some days, he questioned whether leaving had been a mistake. It was during one of these low points that he discovered therapy. A friend recommended a counselor who worked with people transitioning out of high-pressure careers. Ryan reluctantly scheduled an appointment, expecting judgment or misunderstanding. Instead, he found compassion. His therapist didn't see him as a former performer. She saw him as a human being who had gone through trauma he never acknowledged. Through therapy, Ryan began unpacking the layers of himself he had buried. He talked about his upbringing, his need for financial stability, his struggles with self-image, and the emotional cost of living a double life. He confronted the shame he felt about his past and the fear that he would never be accepted outside of the industry. Slowly, he began to heal. He also began exploring new interests. He took classes: photography, digital editing, even marketing. He found himself drawn to the creative aspects of production, the storytelling, the technical craft behind the camera. Over time, he realized that his experience in the adult industry hadn't erased his potential. It had simply taken him on a detour. He could still build a meaningful life, even if the route was unconventional. Ryan's first steady job after leaving the industry was at a small production company. They knew about his past, but instead of judgment, they offered opportunity. He started as an assistant, doing simple tasks: organizing equipment, coordinating schedules, editing short clips. But he found joy in the work, joy he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he was creating something with purpose, something he could be proud of. His confidence grew slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. He made new friends outside the industry, people who valued him for his personality, his humor, his work ethic, not for his on-screen persona. And for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by his past. Rebuilding relationships was another step. Over the years, he had distanced himself from family, embarrassed by what he thought they would think. But as he grew stronger, he reached out. The conversations were difficult, honest, emotional, sometimes painful, but they were necessary. He learned that love could survive discomfort and that people were capable of understanding more than he had given them credit for. He even allowed himself to date again, not with the fear or hesitation he once felt, but with cautious openness. He learned to talk about his past without shame, to share only what he felt comfortable sharing, and to trust his own boundaries. Not every relationship lasted, but each one taught him something valuable about connection, vulnerability, and self-worth. Years passed. Ryan built a new life piece by piece. There were setbacks, of course, moments when memories surfaced unexpectedly or when someone recognized him and treated him differently, but those moments no longer defined him. He had grown stronger, more grounded, more authentic. Eventually, he began mentoring others who wanted to transition out of the adult industry. He shared his experiences with honesty, not to scare them, but to guide them. He helped them understand that leaving wasn't impossible, that healing was real, and that life could be rich and meaningful on the other side. He became a voice of compassion in a world that often lacked it. Looking back, Ryan didn't regret the path he had taken. Not because it was easy, but because it shaped him into someone resilient and self-aware. His past was part of him, but it no longer controlled him. He had escaped the set not by running away from his old life, but by learning to rebuild a new one with intention, courage, and hope. In the end, Ryan's journey wasn't about leaving the industry. It was about finding himself. It was about reclaiming his identity, his self-worth, and his future. It was about learning that healing takes time, that change is possible, and that the human spirit can rise from places others might overlook. His story is a reminder that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, growth, and a life rebuilt from the inside out.